Some trips last 20 hours, some trips last 10 hours, some trips last a day. I'm going to be telling you about the longest trip I've ever took to Iowa Central. This trip began here in Cincinnati, Ohio, where I kissed my mom and my sister goodbye and headed off to Chicago. When I got on the bus, I started to fall asleep. It took me about a 2 hour, I took about a 2 hour nap. It took about 6 hours to get where I was going. When it hit the last hour, the bus driver said, "Oh, and Detroit we're headed to." Detroit, I'm thinking to myself, we're supposed to be headed to Chicago. I get off the bus, I ask the bus driver, "Why are we in Detroit?" He responds and says, "Oh, the bus here in Detroit will take you to Chicago." I say, "Okay." So I get in the terminal at Detroit about 10 o'clock at night. And I'll go up to the lady, and the first thing she says is, "The bus to Chicago is now canceled." She announced it to the whole terminal. Man, I was so devastated. I had to stay in Detroit until the next day, and it's about 10 p.m. at night. I had to stay until 12 p.m. the next day. I had to sleep in the back, in the game room in the back for about 15 hours. So I slept and time passed, and finally the bus came. So the bus to Chicago came and took me about another 7 hours from Detroit to get to Chicago. Finally ended up in Chicago. I look on my sheet and it says I have to wait another 2 hours in Chicago. Whole day is gone by. So I waited in Chicago for 2 hours. I'm starving. I'm tired and stressed out. And the bus to Iowa finally came. So I got on the bus, took another nap. It took me about 6 hours to get to Iowa. Finally ended up in Iowa, and I ended up in this place called the Boondocks of Iowa. I ended up there, and I stayed in like a cabin where they had food, they were serving breakfast and stuff, and they had a store. And the bus driver had told me when he dropped me off, he said, "The bus will be here in about another 2 or 3 hours. It's headed to Iowa Central." I'm thinking to myself, oh my goodness. So I got on the bus, headed to Iowa Central. I asked that bus driver, I said, "When will I get to Iowa Central?" He said, "Oh, it'll be about a 2 hour drive." Oh my goodness. So I took the 2 hour drive, we chatted, we had a good conversation, and I finally ended up at Iowa Central 2 whole days later. Wow. Can't believe it took that long, but you never know what you go through to get where you need to be. Thanks for listening.